I was sitting across from an old colleague last week, one of those overpriced airport bistros, and he was just tapping away at his tablet with this genuine, unironic joy on his face.
What was he looking at?
The new 2026 Global Social Progress Index. He points to these vibrant green bar charts and says, look at this. The equity metrics are off the charts. We're finally measuring what matters.
He saw it as a kind of scientific validation of hope.
He really did. To him, these numbers weren't just data. They were like a secular religious text. He was going on about how our slight decline was actually a necessary correction.
Right. Not based on what he was seeing around him, I take it.
He showed me this PDF from a major NGO. The methodology is ironclad, he says. We are more progressive than ever. He just felt this deep relief that the world was being managed by the right people using the right spreadsheets.
And then reality intruded.
It did. First, the PA system crackles on, that dying battery whine, and the flight board behind him flashes red. Another indefinite delay.
Routine safety inspection, I'm guessing.
On a brand new jet, yep. And then a news alert pops up on the TV. A smash and grab at a pharmacy like 3 blocks from his high safety gated community.
And how did he react to that? That's the fascinating part.
He didn't even look at the TV. He just looked down at his tablet and started scrolling faster as if he could find a metric to drown it all out.
He didn't get angry.
No, he got defensive, muttered something about statistical outliers and the friction of transition. And that's when it hit me. We weren't looking at a report, we were looking at a digital Potemkin village. And it made me wonder, how did we reach a point where the social progress on our screens is an inverse map of the reality outside?
And more importantly, what happens when those metrics just can't hide the decay anymore?
Exactly. And that gap, that's what we're going to get into today. We're doing a deep dive into some pretty heavy material White House memos, think tank reports, to try and understand this divergence.
And this isn't just a collection of random failures. We're looking for a systemic cause. And a term that keeps coming up in the source material is the managerial state.
Right. It sounds a little conspiratorial at first, but it's an old concept, isn't it?
James Burnham and later Samuel Francis really fleshed it out. The core idea is a shift away from a system run by owners to one run by, well, managers.
Technical specialists, bureaucrats, administrators.
Exactly. They don't own the means of production, but they control the process. And because they manage processes, they rely on abstractions, metrics, spreadsheets, these big goals like equity or safety, to justify their roles.
So the theory here is that this managerial class has its own interests, and that primary interest is to make the map look good, even if the territory is, falling apart.
That's the argument. And that's a pretty abstract idea, so I think we need to test it against some concrete examples.
I agree. And the most alarming place to start is with safety critical systems, specifically aviation.
It's where the consequences are most immediate.
For sure. There was this account in our briefing materials. Let me just want to get this right. It's about an engineer in Seattle, a man who'd spent 30 years memorizing the stress-strain curves of titanium alloys. A real expert. He finds himself sidelined during a critical review for a new airframe.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
The room wasn't full of metallurgists.
It was filled with compliance architects. Their focus wasn't on the integrity of the wing rivets, it was on the demographic composition of the design team.
That is a chilling image.
And it gets worse. Months later, a hydraulic line fails on a routine flight, not because of a lack of data, but because the person hired to inspect it had been fast-tracked through a program that prioritized, and this is a quote, inclusive excellence over rigorous technical certification.
It's a story about what happens when we stop treating physics as an absolute.
Right. But my skeptical brain kicks in here. Compliance architects, is that just a caricature? Do we have hard evidence this is actually happening?
We do, actually. We have a White House memo from January 2025 titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. This is an internal document.
Okay, so what does it say?
It explicitly links a near-miss collision near Reagan National Airport, a commercial jet and a military helicopter, to a breakdown in competence.
A breakdown in competence at the FAA.
Yes, and it points to a specific policy shift. The memo cites a recruitment initiative from the previous administration that targeted individuals with severe intellectual disabilities for hiring within the FAA.
Severe intellectual disabilities for an agency like the FAA.
The source material references that specific language from the recruitment plan. And the AeroQuest report we have, The Risks of DEI in Aviation, just hammers this home. It says aviation is a safety-critical industry. The margin for error is basically zero.
Because gravity doesn't care about your social goals.
Gravity does not negotiate. And this report talks about an anti-meritocratic feedback loop.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, the idea is that when you dilute the talent pool with non-technical hiring criteria, proficiency drops. You get more incidents, more near misses. But the loop is that the managerial response isn't to go back to merit. It's to add more management, more oversight, more social engineering to fix the culture.
So the compliance architect from the story, they're not fixing the rivet. They're fixing the demographics of the team that fixes the rivet, and then the rivet fails.
That's the conflict in a nutshell. Physics versus social engineering.
Yeah.
And this obsession with the abstract seems to require a whole army of people to administer it.
Which brings us to our next stop, the universities. If the managerial state has an incubator, this is it.
It definitely is.
I have another story here that really puts a price tag on this. It's about a young researcher at an East Coast university trying to get a grant for clean energy. She found that for every single dollar that went to her lab, $3 were diverted to the salaries of new associate deans of belonging.
Whose job was? What exactly?
To audit the vocabulary in her research papers. Meanwhile, her equipment is gathering dust. The physics department gets shuttered to close a budget deficit, but the administrative headcount doesn't drop by a single person.
It makes the word parasite in the source material feel less like hyperbole.
It does. But again, are we sure the ratio is that skewed? Don't big universities need a lot of admin?
They do, but the data from the Goldwater Institute report is pretty damning.
Yeah.
From 1993 to 2007, full-time administrators grew by 39%.
Okay.
But teaching and research staff, the people actually doing the work, they only grew by 18%. Admin growth was more than double.
And that's the average. Some cases are worse, right?
Much worse. At Arizona State University, administrators per student increased by 94%.
Almost doubled.
While instructional and research staff actually decreased by 2%.
Wow. And then there's that stat about Yale.
Yeah. For marginal revolution, approximately one administrator for every single undergraduate student. A 1-to-1 ratio.
That's unbelievable. It's a bureaucracy that just happens to have students.
It is. And as the National Association of Scholars report points out, these aren't people teaching physics. They're managers for non-instructional endeavors. Wellness, social justice, compliance. They exist to monitor the metrics.
So the university gets a high social progress score by hiring more managers, even if it has to close a science department to pay for them.
The map looks great. The territory is eroding.
Okay, so we've got failing planes and hollowed-out universities. But the place where this friction feels most dangerous for the average person is on the street.
Crime, policing, and this idea of anarcho-tyranny.
Yeah, let me set this up with the third story from our files. It's about a small business owner in San Francisco.
I remember this one.
He finally closes his family's third-generation hardware store. He talks about a new normal where a guy can walk in, shatter a display case, walk out with $1,000 in tools, and the police are discouraged from making an arrest.
Because of restorative justice protocols?
Right. The thief is seen through this lens of systemic equity, a statistic to manage, and the owner who pays his taxes is just left to sweep up the glass.
That is the lived reality of anarcho-tyranny.
I have to admit, that term sounds like a contradiction. Anarchy and tyranny are opposites, aren't they?
They are, but Samuel Francis defined it very specifically. The anarchy part is the state failing to enforce laws against criminals, like the thief in the hardware store.
Okay, so where's the tyranny?
The tyranny is aimed squarely at the law-abiding citizen. It's the state aggressively punishing you for minor infractions, paperwork errors, or saying the wrong thing online.
And there's an example of that in the source material, right? The writer in the UK.
Yeah, Graham Linehan. According to the source, he was met at Heathrow Airport by 5 armed police officers.
Armed officers for what?
For gender-critical tweets. For his speech.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in that same country, shoplifting is often recategorized as antisocial behavior to keep arrest stats down.
So you get a SWAT team for a tweet, but a pass for stealing a chainsaw.
That's the perfect illustration. The state uses immense power to police abstract ideological issues while abandoning its core duty to protect property and safety.
And this connects to that other term from the story, luxury beliefs.
Right. This is from a Manhattan Institute report citing the work of Rob Henderson. A luxury belief is an idea that gives status to the upper class, but imposes a real cost on the lower class.
And the prime example is the defund the police movement.
Exactly. The narrative was that it came from the streets, but the data shows the opposite. Support was highest among high-income white and Asian Democrats.
People in safe neighborhoods.
People for whom the police are an abstraction. For them, it's a status symbol. It says, I'm enlightened. But support was lowest among Black and Hispanic Democrats who actually live in higher crime areas.
Because for them, it's not a belief, it's their safety.
The elite get the moral satisfaction, and the hardware store owner gets the broken glass.
So it all comes back to the inverse map. The better the social metrics look on the spreadsheet, the worse the functional reality gets for everyone else.
Which leads to what one of the sources calls the entropy of civilization. It's described as a winter phase.
That sounds final.
It's a warning. It talks about precautionary paralysis, where institutions become so scared of violating these complex social metrics that they just stop functioning. They can't act. They stop fixing planes. They stop stopping crime.
So what's the way out? The source mentioned something about lighting a candle.
It's a call to build what it terms parallel structures, to preserve what it calls cognitive sovereignty.
Meaning what? Trust your own eyes over the report.
In a nutshell, yes. Refuse to accept the metric when it contradicts reality. You see a smashed store, you call it a crime, not social friction.
So the resistance isn't some grand gesture, it's just refusing to lie about what you see.
Exactly. The final thought from the source is that reality is brutally indifferent to our spreadsheets. Gravity doesn't care about a diversity report. So the real task is to remember how to do the actual work, how to build things, how to teach, how to keep order, so that knowledge survives this era of the managers.
It's a call to look at the flight board flashing red and believe that over the green chart on the tablet.
That is the first step.
Well, that is plenty for you to chew on. Next time you see a headline celebrating a new record in social progress, maybe take a look out the window first. We'll see you on the next deep dive.